Hi there, Steve Brooks here. I'm not a baker, but I like to make sourdough bread. And in this video, I hope to keep it kind of short, but there are so many steps involved in making sourdough that it could end up longer than what I imagined. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to take the sourdough starter out of the refrigerator because I only make sourdough bread once a week. So I put it in the refrigerator. If I were making it 2 or 3 times a week, I'd keep it out on the counter at room temperature. But since I only do it once a week, I put it into the refrigerator when I'm done with it and then bring it out for 2 hours. And so that's what I've done here. I'm let it rest for 2 hours, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so here we have a scale and the sourdough starter that I've taken out, and it's been resting for about 2 hours at room temperature. And what I'll do first is remove all but 1/2 cup, and then I'll add flour to it and lukewarm water. So I have my favorite mixing spoon here, and I have a chopstick. And what I do with the chopstick is, after I get the kind of sticky starter out, I clean this off with the chopstick, and that's I'll put the discard in this container right here, which will go back in the refrigerator. And that way I can use the discard later for waffles or crackers or something like that. Another thing I go through is paper towels, because I don't want this sourdough starter, especially because it's so sticky, it dries into a concrete-like material, and I don't want that going down our kitchen sink. People have had problems with garbage disposals and everything, and I think it has to do with putting sourdough starter down the sink. But if you wipe it off with the paper towel like that first, and then you wash the spoon, then you throw the paper towel away, and it'll save your plumbing. So otherwise it drops to the bottom of that P-trap, it dries like that, and then the next batch, it keeps on adding up, and then you have plumbing problems. So try not to put the starter especially down the sink. So I'm going to remove all but 1/2 cup, and you can see how sticky that is, or if that wasn't in the way. And then what I'll do is add 100 grams of flour to the starter and 100 grams of water, lukewarm water. It should be about 80, 90 degrees. What I do with the water is I'll put it in the microwave for like 12 seconds, about 1/2 cup, and then I'll measure out into another cup the 100 grams, and that's it. Okay, so I have the lukewarm water that I warmed up for 12 seconds in the microwave. It's not quite as hot as bath water, say, but it's lukewarm. And now I'll measure the 100 grams of flour. And just a little bit more. Okay, 100. So put that in there, and then I'll zero out the scale again and measure out 100 grams of water. And that's close enough. And then what I'll do is just stir that until it's pretty well mixed. And then after this, we'll let it sit for 2 hours at room temperature. And what I'll do is, again, this is pretty sticky, so I use a chopstick, get it off the spoon back in there, mix it up a little bit more. And that's pretty good right there. And then after this, I'll take the paper towel to kind of clean this off, clean the chopstick off and the spoon. So that's good enough right there. And that's what can happen. But anyway, so we'll kind of put the rubber band here to the height where it is, and we can see later how much this expands upward. So we'll let it sit for about 2-3 hours at room temperature. Now I just have to get this cleaned up before somebody else notices. Okay, so I know I said 2 hours for it to come up to this level. It's right there right now, so it's nice and active and ready to put in the dough. But actually it's been 3 hours. So the 2 hour mark was only about there, so I wanted it to extend up about there. And so it can vary depending on the temperature of the kitchen. Right now our kitchen is about 70 degrees. In the summertime it might get up to 76 or 76, 77 degrees. And you know, it'll only take like about an hour to get up there. So a lot of it depends on temperature fluctuations. Another thing that will affect the sourdough bread is the humidity. We live in a kind of a dry, high desert humidity here, so it's different than like in San Francisco, where the best sourdough comes from. But at any rate, I've measured out in the 3-quart, just 3-quart or 4-quart, I forget, but the large Pyrex bowl, I've measured out 340 grams of the lukewarm water, and we'll put a cup, or actually 227 grams of the starter into here, and then we'll add the water and mix it all up and then cover it. So that's the next step. And so I'm going to, oh, what else? All these times and measurements and all that I have available in a PDF that I'll put down in the comments, and you can just download that and it'll have all this information on there. So I'll measure 227 grams, put it in here. Actually, I make it like 229, a little bit extra, because some of it will adhere to the. Okay, so I measured out 229 about, so I'll spoon this into the water, and you know it's about right when it starts to float like that in the water. Okay. And then Then I'll add the flour to that, and this, right now, there's about a half cup left in there. So we will, what we'll do at the end of this step is replenish this with 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of lukewarm water, stir it up, and then we'll... By the way, this is the flour that I'm using, organic, unbleached, all-purpose flour, not bread flour, not bleached. And so I get this at Costco. It's like 20 pounds for $5. It's you can go to have Bob's Red Mill, or what's the other one? I forget. Okay, so I have 360 grams of flour measured out, and I'm going to dump it in there and then set the timer for 1 minute. Hey Google, set timer for 1 minute.
Sure, 1 minute, starting now.
And then just mix it up. Okay, once it's all mixed up, we cover it. I usually use the plastic wrap, cover it. Bye. And then we'll let it sit for 4 hours, I believe. Actually, before I put it into the refrigerator, I just wanted to show you how much this has grown, and also the consistency. You can see it's kind of wobbly, so that's a good sign. And I fed the starter, and you can see it's back up here. And I'm going to put this in the refrigerator and until I use it next week. And like I said before, if I were to make these every 2 or 3 days, then I would put them, just leave it out on the counter at room temperature. But since I'm waiting a week, I'll put it into the refrigerator along with this. So this time I will see you in the morning. So this is our second day of making the sourdough bread. We'll be baking it this afternoon after a couple of processes. I wanted to point out that this is a 2-day process. It used to take me 4 days, but I've narrowed it down to 2. And this recipe is for 2 loaves of bread. I couldn't see putting in this amount of time and just coming out with 1 loaf. So this is for 2 loaves. So I've weighed out 240 grams of flour. And one thing I wanted to point out, if you don't want to use a scale, you can convert all these measurements to cups and just use cups. So to the 240 grams, take a tablespoon of sugar and a tablespoon of sea salt. It's important to use sea salt. It really makes a difference. Ran out one time and it just did not turn out the same. So stir that around. So I don't know if you can see it or not, but this really bubbled up nicely overnight in the refrigerator. And we have our flour mixture. We'll just kind of spread that up like that and then dig into it to mix up that. I don't know if you can see this, but it's grown a little bit. That's a good sign in the proofing stage. And I'm going to pull it out of here and just fold it, try to get some more of that flour incorporated in. And then we'll bring it out to the table here, spread it out a little bit. Starting to feel just a little bit sticky. That's a good sign. You don't want it too sticky where it's sticking to everything, but pull it up and spread it out, and then do it in the other direction, and then rotate it 90 degrees and fold it over. And the next time we do this, another 30 minutes of resting, we'll take it out and start slapping it down on this. While we're waiting for that 30 minutes to pass, I thought I'd show you something. This is a little kit bought on Amazon, and it includes two proofing bowls, which I'll show you later, and a knife I think it's called a lame knife. But anyway, that's where you score it just before baking, so that it doesn't explode. Now, I've tried using it without scoring, and it's kind of cool the way it explodes. It gives a totally different texture to the bread when it bakes. And this scraper, I use this scraper for a lot of things. We'll use it to cut the dough, and then also it's good for scraping out, not these bowls, but the glass bowls. And then this is good for scraping off the countertop. Okay, this will be the second of the stretch and folding sequences. There will be 4 of them over a course of 2 hours. So we'll take this out of the bowl, and there's still some loose parts in it on top. It's a little crusty, but what you want to do is slap it down on the counter like this, spread it out a little bit, rotate it 90 degrees, slap it, rotate it 90 degrees, flatten it out a little bit, and slap it. Again, this toughens up the gluten, so it'll hold in the air bubbles. That's what I understand anyway, but yeah, we'll just kind of stick that in there like that, and then form it into a ball. Put it back in the bowl and set the timer for another 30 minutes. So here we are at the third slap around, and rotate 90 degrees, rotate 90 degrees, and form it into a ball. Put it back in the bowl, cover it, and just one more after this, and then we'll let it proof for 2 hours. Okay, so we're getting ready for the 4th and final slap around. And slap it, fold it, rotate 90 degrees, and then roll it into a ball, and we'll cover it and let it sit at room temperature for 2. Okay, it's rested for 2 hours, and so we're going to get ready to put them into the proofing baskets. So we're going to flour these up a little bit, and there's one that's ready to go. Now put the excess on the counter here. I want to flour up the flour. flour up the hands a little bit and take this out of there. You can see how that's grown in the last 2 hours. And at this point, you want to start treating it gently, and because you want to keep the air bubbles that have built up in there, and start dividing it in half with the scraper. I do one a little bit bigger because I have 2 different sizes of Dutch ovens, although that looks pretty equal. So I'll cut a little off this one. To put it with that one. Let's set this aside and get more flour under there because we don't want it sticking to the table. And spread it out like that. And you can. So the video got interrupted by the alarm, but I just wanted to basically, it was taking those 2 boulets, I guess they call them, and flattening them out, and then folding them into thirds, and then again, and then pinching the seams together and putting them in these bowls. So, and then take the bowls and spray them with water, just lightly, turn the towel over and spray it with some more water, and we're gonna let that sit for 2 hours. Okay, so the oven has been heating up to 500 degrees, and what I'll do now is take these out of the bowls upside down onto pieces of parchment and take the knife and score it. We'll score this one about a 1/2 inch deep. We'll put a cross in it like that. So that one's ready to go. Oops. And this one got a little too much flour on that side, so I'm just going to dust it off a little bit. And this one I'll score kind of like that. And these will be ready to go into the pan. So I'll grab the biggest one out of here. You see that I put a little pie cooler on there so it keeps the bread off the bottom. Put it in there like that. And I don't preheat the lids because it's a little easier to handle at this point. You can preheat the lids, I just find it a little less dangerous. So, and put it in there. Oops, I almost burnt myself there. These things are hot at 500 degrees. And leave it there for 20 minutes. set the timer for 20 minutes, and then we'll kick the temperature down to 450, cook it for another 20 minutes, take off the lids, and cook them another 5 minutes. So that's a total of 45 minutes of baking. Okay, so these have been in the oven for 20 minutes at 500, then 20 minutes at 450, then took the lids off for 5, and now they're ready to come out. So, there's one. There's two. So, take them out here. And take a little cooling racks. Cooling racks. So there they are. So there's the bread baking, the results of fair amount of time put into it, but we enjoy it. And don't try to cut into this when it's hot, or else it'll start to collapse. You need to let it cool off a little bit, and then it will be easier to cut. And I hope you enjoyed this. And good baking.